Glacier Peak? It's being watched by exactly one seismometer. Just one. Right now. Today, one single dot of data listening for the heartbeat of one of our country's most dangerous volcanoes. I'm not even kidding. I'm not saying that for drama. That's just the straight-up, confirmed truth for a mountain the U.S. Geological Survey calls a very high threat. And it's one of only 18 volcanoes in the whole country with that label. And here's the kicker, the part nobody seems to get. This thing is only 70 miles from downtown Seattle. It's a 10,541-foot monster that's erupted with 5 times the force of the 1980 Mount St. Helens blast. And it's practically blind. For years, there was this plan to fix it, to finally put in an early warning system. That plan went nowhere. So, what happens to all those towns, farms, and families living downstream when a huge geological threat isn't just known, but you literally can't see it coming? You need to remember this number. 1. Just one seismometer, all by itself, on a mountain covered in over a dozen glaciers. To really get how bad that is, you have to understand what seismologists actually do. They're not just listening for a random earthquake. They're doing forensics on the Earth's insides. When magma starts shifting miles underground, it makes these tiny, almost impossible to feel tremors. It cracks rocks. It pushes its way up to the surface. A bunch of seismometers together acts like a whole team of investigators. By comparing signals from different spots, scientists can pinpoint where it's happening, how deep it is, and what kind of disturbance it is. They can tell you if it's shallow, if it's moving up, if it's magma, or just a glacier making a noise. With one seismometer, you can't do any of that. One seismometer tells you something happened. It doesn't tell you where. It doesn't tell you what. A sudden burst of small quakes deep under the summit could totally be the first sign of a massive eruption. Or it could just be an ice quake, which happens all the time when a glacier cracks. With only one station, those signals look pretty much the same. But the difference is huge. The difference is how much time you have to react. The difference is people's lives. Dr. Wes Thelen, a USGS seismologist, said it's like a cop having only one witness to a crime. It's just not enough. Not for a crime scene this big. Not for something this dangerous. This isn't some theoretical problem either, Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier, the other big volcanoes in the Washington Cascades, they've got tons of sensors. They have whole teams of witnesses. Glacier Peak? One lonely watchman. What if that one thing fails? And here's what really should make you think. Glacier Peak is just as explosive as Mount St. Helens. Those two are the only volcanoes in all of Washington confirmed to have had these gigantic, Plinian eruptions in the last 15,000 years. We're not talking about slow lava flows here. These are cataclysms, events that change the sky and the land for hundreds of miles around. And we're heading into one of these pretty much blind. So, why was this volcano left so exposed, so dangerously? You've got to get its geography. Glacier Peak is like the invisible giant of the Cascades. Unlike Rainier, that big proud cone that you can see from Seattle, Glacier Peak is shy. It's buried deep inside the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest, hidden behind a bunch of other jagged peaks. It's so out of the way that when American settlers first mapped the area in the 1850s, they didn't even know it was a volcano. Local indigenous people had to tell a naturalist named George Gibbs that the mountain, which they called Dachobed, or the Great Parent, had recently smoked. That isolation is a problem. Since the volcano is inside the federally protected Glacier Peak wilderness, getting to it is really hard. No roads go to its base. Every piece of equipment, every scientist, has to fly in by helicopter or do this incredibly tough 30-mile round-trip hike. You can't just pour some concrete for a sensor. Every single thing they install has to follow strict environmental rules to keep the wilderness wild. This mess of bureaucracy and geography is exactly why, for decades, putting in a proper warning system felt too hard, too expensive, and too complicated. So the volcano was just left alone, quiet, unseen, until you couldn't ignore it anymore. On March 12, 2019, Congress finally passed the National Volcano Early Warning and Monitoring System Act. It basically admitted that the country wasn't watching its most dangerous geological threats. Volcanoes like Glacier Peak were a big reason that bill got written. Money was set aside. The USGS was told to fill in the monitoring gaps on its most neglected, high-threat mountains. Finally, a plan was happening. In June 2022, after years of talking, the U.S. Forest Service gave the USGS highly specific permits to put 4 new, high-tech monitoring stations in the wilderness area. We're talking more than just seismometers. They were going to be multi-parametric stations with super accurate GPS to spot ground swelling and sensors to sniff out volcanic gases. A whole diagnostic kit. This was supposed to be the solution. They aimed to install them in the summer of 2023. That deadline came and went. The logistics were a nightmare. The working season is short. The weather is brutal. So they pushed the timeline to the summer and fall of 2024. This was supposed to be the year we finally got eyes on Glacier Peak. In October 2024, crews flew into those remote approved sites to get ready for the new installations. They were there to find stable ground for the sensitive equipment, and that's when they found something nobody had thought of. The mountain itself was literally crumbling. Instead of the solid rock needed for the GPS units, the scientists found broken, unstable ground, loose rock and soil that shifted with the seasons. Dr. John Major, a research hydrologist with the USGS, explained the issue. He said if they are not in stable rock, they can shift around due to snow loading, freeze-thaw cycles, and soil movement, causing errors in measurements. This is a big deal. A high-precision GPS unit is designed to detect tiny movements, millimeters of ground deformation, like the subtle bulge of a mountainside as magma pushes up from below. But if the sensor itself is sitting on soil that moves a few inches every winter as the ground freezes and thaws, that data is useless. It would give you false alarms. It would be like trying to measure how much a skyscraper sways during an earthquake while you're standing on a skateboard. The machine would constantly scream that the volcano was about to blow, when really it was just the ground settling. It was a huge setback, a geological problem. The very decay of the mountain's surface was stopping scientists from putting in the tools that could eventually save the people below it. And that wasn't all. The USGS also confirmed a last-minute glitch with a helicopter vendor made the 2024 installation window even worse. It was a whole series of failures. Bureaucracy, logistics, and now the mountain itself. All conspiring to keep the volcano in the dark. The window closed. The snow came back. And the 4 new stations stayed packed away in a warehouse, leaving that single old seismometer to stand guard all alone. For another year, maybe even longer. The danger from Glacier Peak isn't some abstract, far-off thing. It's a very real, terrifying scenario aimed right at the communities of the North Cascades. This volcano's main weapon isn't lava, it's water, or to be more accurate, water, rock, and heat all mixed into this insane force of nature called a lahar. A lahar is a volcanic mudflow, but mudflow is too nice a word. It's misleading. This isn't just some slide. This is a flood of hot, wet concrete. When a volcano like Glacier Peak erupts, its immense heat instantly melts the dozens of glaciers and tons of snow on its summit. This unleashes a biblical torrent of water that rips rocks, soil, and whole forests right off the mountainside. The mixture turns into a chaotic slurry, thicker than water, heavier than earth, moving at highway speeds. It can be hundreds of feet deep, hot enough to boil, and so thick it carries house-sized boulders, logging trucks, and bridges like they're just driftwood. It doesn't go around things, it just wipes them out. That wall of debris would pour straight into the Skagit and Stillaguamish river valleys. These aren't empty wild areas. These are the hearts of busy counties. The flow would speed towards towns like Darrington and Concrete. Then further downstream to Arlington, Sedro-Woolley, Burlington, Mount Vernon, and LaConner. Farming communities, small towns, places full of people who see the Cascades as a beautiful view, not an active threat. Without a proper warning system, the first sign of a lahar might be a distant rumble or a sudden, violent surge in the river. By then, it would be too late. The warning time would be a matter of minutes, if there was any at all. This is what happens when you only have one witness. The history of this volcano is written in eruptions that are just mind-boggling. Around 13 to 14,000 years ago, after the last ice age, Glacier Peak exploded. It didn't just erupt, it detonated, spitting out 5 times more rock and ash than the 1980 Mount St. Helens blast. The event was so huge, it buried entire river valleys under hundreds of feet of debris. That's not a guess. That's not some computer model. That's what geologists find today when they dig into the landscape downstream. Proof of a cataclysm way bigger than anything modern America has ever seen. And this wasn't a one-off. The volcano had another really big eruption just 1,800 years ago, a tiny blink in geological time. And its most recent known activity, a smaller steam and ash event, was around the year 1700, only about 300 years ago. This isn't a dead volcano. It's not just sleeping. It's a restless, active volcano with a clear history of waking up violently. And its cycles are measured in centuries, not thousands of years. We're now several centuries past its last stirrings. Every new bit of data just makes the situation feel more urgent. Studies from late 2024 showed that glaciers on top of active volcanoes move up to 46% faster than normal glaciers. The heat from inside the mountain melts the ice from below, letting the glacier slide faster. Glacier Peak's dozen glaciers aren't just passive ice fields. They're like a thermometer, a direct way to see how much heat is escaping from the Earth's core right underneath them. They're moving faster. The mountain is warm. It's alive. And then, just when you thought this story couldn't get more frustrating, it did. After the geological and logistical failures of 2024, with scientists scrambling to find new, stable spots for the delayed monitors, a new problem popped up. Not from the mountain, but from Washington, D.C. In February 2025, huge federal workforce cuts, driven by this new Department of Government Efficiency, started to hit the country's science agencies. The USGS got hit. All of a sudden, the issue wasn't just finding stable rock or a working helicopter. The problem was not enough money and not enough people. Dr. Harold Tobin, who runs the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network and is Washington State seismologist, gave a serious warning. He said these budget cuts were potentially going to start having an impact, if it continues, on the quality of our monitoring network and our ability to do the kinds of warnings that the public is depending on us to do. It was the ultimate bureaucratic nightmare, a moment of unbelievable irony. After years of fighting for permits in the wilderness, after finally getting the go-ahead, after figuring out a plan to deal with the mountain's own physical problems, the whole project was now in danger because of a budget line item. The money for the very warning system Congress demanded was now uncertain. We knew the solution. We had the technology. The need was clear, and yet the system was just stalling out. As of July 2026, the official word on the upgrades is indefinitely delayed. There's no new public timeline for when those 4 stations will get put in. The USGS weekly updates confirm that Glacier Peak is still at a normal green alert level. But normal for a volcano we can't properly see? That's a dangerously vague term. It just means nothing obvious is happening on the outside. It tells us nothing about the pressure building on the inside. This isn't about not having the technology. We have the tools. This isn't about not knowing enough. The USGS and PNSN are experts. This is a story about one thing after another going wrong. A story about a problem so big, so remote, and so complicated that it's beaten every attempt to fix it. It started with being geographically isolated. Decades of bureaucratic neglect made it worse. It got blocked by the mountain's own physical instability, and now it's stuck because of political and financial indifference. 2 volcanoes, St. Helens and Glacier Peak, both powerful enough to change the Pacific Northwest. One is watched by a ton of electronic eyes, every little tremble and sigh recorded and analyzed. The other, known to the Soxhuatl people as Dacobed, the Great Parent, sits alone in its wilderness fortress, covered in clouds, watched by a single old instrument. The towns in the Skagit and Stillaguamish valleys just keep growing. Families move in. Schools get built. Life happens in the shadow of a beautiful, quiet peak. They're relying on a warning that, right now, can't be guaranteed. Not because the science isn't there, not because the danger is unknown, but because we haven't listened. A volcano that unleashed a blast 5 times bigger than Mount St. Helens is being watched with less equipment than a local weather station. Less than a witness. It's barely a whisper. The mountain is quiet today, but the pressure is building. The glaciers are moving. The ground isn't stable. And its last known eruption was only 300 years ago. One witness.